Hey guys, Sir here. This is my first impressions review of the Logitech G Pro Wireless. At the time of this recording, I've been using this mouse for less than a day. Well, here's what I like about the mouse so far and what I don't like about the mouse so far. This mouse probably has one of the best scroll wheels I've ever tried. The steps on this thing feel nice and crisp. The one thing I will say about it is, the button on it seems to be a little stiff. It doesn't really bother me because I don't really press it that often, but if you're someone who uses it often in the games you play, that might be a downside for you. Another thing that I really like about this mouse and appreciate is the fact that you can take off the right side thumb buttons and replace them with flat surfaces, so you don't have to constantly press those when you're gaming. Speaking of the side buttons on this mouse, they're not great, but they're not horrible either. In fact, I'd say they're actually pretty average. While on the subject of buttons, let's talk about the actual buttons themselves. First off, they're separated from the shell, which I appreciate. Second of all, they're pretty nice. The only complaint I have about them is whenever you bottom them out, they tend to feel a little mushy. I don't really know how to describe it other than mushy. It's not an awful experience, but it's definitely noticeable. As I was recording this video, I actually noticed what I was actually experiencing with the mushy buttons was whenever I press them both down at the same time. So for instance, if I scope in a game and I shoot at the same time, I would notice the mushiness. I think it has more to do with the spacing than the actual switches themselves. It's also worth mentioning that this only happens if you press the buttons down in a certain spot on the mouse. It's not everywhere, so it depends on how you're going to grip the mouse if this problem is going to be present for you. One nice thing about this mouse is the DPI button is on the bottom of the mouse, so you're not going to press it accidentally when you're gaming. However, this hasn't ever really been a problem with Logitech mice because you can turn it off in the software, and in fact you can actually bind the DPI button in the Logitech software to another button. But in general, I'm glad they played it safe and put it on the bottom anyway. As I'm looking around the mouse, I also noticed a bunch of nuances to this mouse that I didn't notice before. Like for instance, on the bottom, next to the mouse feet, there's a little notch next to each individual one to make it easier to peel off the mouse gates. Which is amazing because anyone who's ever tried to replace those before knows sometimes they can be a pain. In fact, I'll probably be replacing these mouse gates because I don't personally think these ones are that great. They're definitely usable, but they're pretty thin and they don't have much glide to them. Finally, the shape of this mouse is pretty great. I personally wish it was a little bit wider so I could grip it a little better, but I still think for the mass majority of people in the market as a whole, they're going to like this mouse. One thing I'm going to have to get used to is the weight of the mouse. This mouse is super light, especially when you take into consideration that it's a wireless mouse, but when you're spoiled to the weight of the ultralight, it can be a little heavy. But I think this is something that I can get used to over time. Those are my thoughts and first impressions on the Logitech G Pro Wireless. Thank you for watching, and if you want to know how this mouse works out for me in a couple months from now, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can know when my full review comes out.